As we all know, 80% of our RC car setup is our tire selection, and most of the time it's pretty much a guessing game as to whether or not you get the right tire selected for outdoor racing. Now, I have done videos related to tires before, but I haven't really focused on one particular subject or even brand for that matter. Luckily, the guys at Peach State Hobbies and Ogo USA decided to send me this. I'm going to be going over each of their tread patterns and when to use them, along with which tire you'd see from other brands that are similar and serve a similar purpose. The reason I chose Ogo as my analog for this video, beyond them helping me make this video in the first place, is because Ogo tire tread patterns are pretty simple and cover pretty much all the bases you'd see in a normal A-scale track in the modern RC world. If you'd like to buy any of these tires, I'll leave a link in the description below along with my discount code, ROACHRC, all caps, no spaces. Anything you purchase using that code will directly support me as well. It's also important to note that this video will be a lot shorter in terms of length as I'm trying to keep it more simple. With that out of the way, let us begin. Let's begin with the most basic tire tread pattern you're likely to see at most tracks and events in the United States. I like to call this tire the spaced block tire. These tires have a very wide working range and are able to be used on a wide variety of tracks. Generally, you'll see these tires most often on dusty surfaces with a hard packed layer underneath. This is a very common among most arena events you'll see like Wicked Weekend, AMS, and Fall Brawl. You'll also be able to use this tire on most permanent tracks where, once again, the track is dusty on top with a hard surface underneath. This doesn't mean that you can't use the tire tread pattern on a higher bite surface, like you'd see on a track when it's blown off, or on a looser broken up surface like you'd see at something like Silver State. In fact, they tend to be a very safe choice, however they won't be the optimal choice for those conditions. Other tire treads from other brands with similar usages will be the Dialed RC V1, the Rawspeed Mach 1s, the TZO 402s, Promos and Raptors and Spitfires, the J-Concepts Reflex and Stalkers, and of course what you're seeing on screen now, the Ogo Storms. Another tire that works in similar conditions when the track is a little bit more dusty and you need only a little bit of a contact patch with the ground, you'll need what I like to call a small pin tire. These tires used to be much more popular when tracks were a little bit softer and a lot dustier. You needed a tire that could bite into the soft dirt so that you can get into the slightly harder surface underneath. Some tires that are in this style include but are not limited to the Proline Holeshot, the J-Concepts Dirt Bites, the Hot Race Bangkok, the VP Pro Grips, and these, the Ogo Blizzards. When the conditions are much more moist and loamy, then your tire choice becomes a little bit more convoluted as it seems as though each tire company has a different solution to the loam problem, at least in terms of surface level design. However, they all have one thing in common. They all have big boy lugs, so that's what I'm going to call them. Big boy lug tires, like I said, are for more loamy conditions where you don't want to clog up your tires with damp clumped up dirt. The lugs are spaced out as to give you much more room for said dirt to escape and give you optimal grip. Some tires that are in the style include but are not limited to the Proline Blockade, the Hot Race Alaska, and these, the Ogo Tide and Wind. I tied these together since they share a similar purpose. Next up, when the track gets a little bit more broken in and the dust goes away via general running or perhaps the track being hit with leaf blowers, then you have some more options. Let's start with probably the safest option for these conditions, the dense pin tire. These tires tend to do best on tracks that are smooth and or abrasive with the slightest hint of dust in certain areas. They also work well in an arena style track has broken in a bit and isn't made with really soft dirt like at Silver State. I used these tires at the Peach State Classic in 2024 and they did perform very well. It's important to note however that this style of tire will not work on very wet and loamy conditions, or where the dirt is very soft and malleable. Other tire brands with similar usages and other brands include but are not limited to the J-Concepts Relapse and Rehab, the Dialed RC V6 and V3, the Proline Slide Lock, the VP Pro Blade, and of course these, the Ogo Twisters. Now, what if you want a tire that will work for a long period of time, say during practice or during a long nitro main where you need the best wear characteristics? This is where the next tread pattern comes in. I like to call this one the dense block tire. These tires have a few characteristics that make them suited for stable long wear tires. Since the lugs are so close together, they act more like a dense pin rather than the spaced block tires I mentioned earlier, but much more stable and easier to drive, if a bit slower. Also, because the blocks are so close together and because you're usually using this tire in a more hard compound, we'll get to compounds later, the blocks themselves don't really flex or roll on top of themselves. As a result, you're going to get the optimal wear on these types of tires so they can last for long mains on abrasive surfaces while staying consistent throughout their wear. The tires most associated with this design will be the VP Pro TurboTrax, the Dialed RC V6, the Proline Convicts, and these, the Ogo Volcanoes. When the track is very clean with little to no dust at all, or perhaps you're running in an indoor track, the next style of tire will suit your needs. These tires are known as the bar or web style tire. Like I said before, this type of tire works best on an extremely clean and sometimes swept surface with very little dust. However, the conditions in which you'd use these tires in regards to temperature and abrasiveness will vary once we get into compounds in the next section. The design of the web style tire is to give you the maximum amount of contact patch while still being suitable for outdoor conditions. Pretty much every tire company has a web style tire, so I'll only list off a few. The J-Concepts Ellipse, the Hot Race Sahara, the Raw Speed Radars, and of course the ones you're seeing now, the Ogo Chesties. Now let's talk a little bit about tire compounds. Choosing a tire compound normally depends on the temperature of the environment you're in and crucially the temperature of the track. The colder it is, the softer the compound you're going to need in order to gain optimal traction. Each tire company will have some sort of chart regarding what tire compound to use at which temperature level, so be sure to do some reading on that. Another thing to take into account a lot of time is which type of compound to use. Generally, tire companies will have 2 to 3 compound types, those being a normal compound, a clay compound, and a long wear compound. Normal compounds are your general use compound that you can use in most situations. Clay compounds are usually used in conditions where there's a decent amount of moisture in the track, and long wear compounds are pretty much exactly what they say on the tin. They last longer than other compounds of tires, so they are ideal for long nitro mains on abrasive surfaces where you need consistent traction. It's important to note as well that the compound of the tire can really change the usage of each tread pattern. For example, these super soft clay compound twisters on the right work very well when the humidity is high but the temperature is low. Winter racing in Georgia, for example. These ultra soft twisters in the normal compound may seem to serve a similar purpose and even may feel similar to the touch, but they excel when the temps are low but the track and air itself is more dry. The last little tip I have when it comes to tire choice is to try and stick with one brand for the most part. Of course, you'll want to experiment with different brands and different compounds to see which one you like most of all, but once you find the tire brand that you like, try to stick with it. This way you'll have more knowledge as to when to use which tire compound and tread pattern. Like I said before, tires are about 80% of your setup when it comes to outdoor off-road racing. Unfortunately, this game of which tire works and when is more or less a guessing game at the end of the day, and nobody truly has a 100% hit rate when it comes to tire choice. However, with the experience and time, you can turn that guessing game into an educated guessing game. That's all for now. Once again, I'd like to thank Peach State Hobbies and Ogo USA for helping me make this video. If you'd like to purchase any of these tires I showed in this video, be sure to check out the links below and use code ROACHRC at checkout to save a bit. Also, if you want to support me another way, you can subscribe to my Patreon. Speaking of which, I'd like to thank my active patrons Michael Williams, RC World Discord server, Casey Nix, Dave Armstrong, Rob Benningfield, Caden Merks, Buddy Howell, Jeffrey Kunz, James D. Anderson, Shane T. Ruth, Gable Barber, Maxim RC Hobbies, and especially Morrison Watt. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.